Finishing off at number 5, Barangan City. And for our first entry, we're heading over to the northern Samar province of the Philippines, where for hundreds of years, local legend and whisperings of folklore have spoken about a place that seemingly doesn't exist within our dimension, but is instead a portal to another realm where the supernatural encantos, the enchanted supernatural beings of Filipino myth and legend, reside. Some refer to this mysterious place as the Black City or the Invisible City, but in the language of Waray, the local tongue of northern Samar, the literal translation of this place is where one finds the lost. Geographically speaking, the actual location of this mysterious place is considered by many to be pretty definitive, and Barangan City allegedly exists in a location off the coast of Gandara, Tarangnan and Pangsanghan in the murky depths of the North Pacific Ocean. In fact, not only that, but a number of people have actually claimed to have seen this city, which only ever appears at night in a strange array of bright glowing energy. Many sailors have claimed to have seen a dazzling city of light appearing in the distance on moonless nights, only shimmering in the distance, if only for a few brief moments. They describe it as a dark, beautiful city with high-rise towering buildings equipped with some strange advanced technology. In fact, several years ago there were numerous reports of a Japanese mining company capturing satellite images of a series of brightly lit islands off the coast of northern Samar, who believed it to be rich deposits of gold and uranium. Obviously, as mining companies are apt to do, they began work immediately, setting up a large worksite in the town of San Jorge, sending boats out to the location where their satellite images had captured the lights. Strangely enough though, the town of San Jorge and the mining company were soon plagued with a series of mysterious accidents and mishaps, and within mere weeks the company was forced to shut down the operation in fear of bankruptcy. Now, I'm not saying what they found was definitively evidence of Barangan City, but I'm also not saying that because it's pretty interesting, right? Swinging in at number 4, Kotesh. And this particular bastion of folklore is equal parts awesome and equal parts something straight out of a fantasy novel. As the legend tells it, beneath the waters of Lake Svetloya of Nizhny Novgorod Oblast in central Russia resides a town of unimaginable ingenuity that has remained undiscovered ever since its creation sometime in the year 1200 AD. And that's down to the fact that the invisible town of Kotesh has an uncanny habit of submerging beneath the waters of Lake Svetloya at will. Yeah, isn't folklore awesome? As the legend goes, in the early 13th century, the Grand Prince of Vladimir Yuri II built a town known as Mali Kotesh, or Little Kotesh, on the banks of the Volga River. Later on, after the town found great success and fortune, Yuri decided to cross the other rivers that flowed from the banks of the Volga, where he found an even more beautiful spot on the shores of Lake Svetloya. According to Russian folklore, that's where Yuri decided to build a town even greater than Little Kotesh, where he named this one Bolshoi Kotesh, or Big Kotesh. Soon after its construction, the two towns of Kotesh became a place of such immense success that they drew the attention of the Golden Horde, the Mongol army under the leadership of Batu Khan that had already conquered vast portions of the Russian lands. As the legend goes, the Mongols quickly captured and ransacked Little Kotesh, forcing Yuri II to retreat back through the hidden passages of the woods to Bolshoi Kotesh. The Golden Horde quickly found him though, sheltering in the town on the shores of Lake Svetloya, but as soon as the army approached the town, they found no fortifications, just a bunch of villagers in the square on their knees praying. Thinking they quickly got the upper hand, the Golden Horde charged at them, but suddenly countless fountains of water burst from beneath the ground as the army were washed back, witnessing the town of Kotesh submerge itself fully into the lake before disappearing entirely. Some say that still to this day you can still hear the chiming of bells and people singing from beneath the waters of Lake Svetloya. Russian Atlantis? Who knew? Next up at number 3, High Brazil. And for this one in particular, we're heading over to a mystical, magical realm that allegedly existed off the western coast of Ireland, a breathtaking place of immense natural beauty and also home to some of the most awesome instances of folklore going. Although this one is perhaps a somewhat lesser known location of local legend and is shrouded in mysteries of both the physical and the metaphysical. And also, no, not Brazil as in the very real place that exists in South America. In fact, the actual etymology of Brazil or High Brazil is relatively uncertain, but is thought to have come from the Irish word we Brisail, which means descendants of the clan Brisail, one of the ancient clans of Ireland. As the legend tells it, High Brazil is a phantom island that is said to lie somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. An Irish myth describes it as a place cloaked in mist that appears for only one day every 7 years. Despite that though, strangely enough, the island itself appeared on a number of nautical maps dating as far back as 1325, and up until the late 1800s 1800s was considered to be very much a real place. So much so, in fact, that in 1480 expeditions for the island of Hypersil set out from Bristol, where, although the historical records are murky, a captain known as John Cabot was noted as actually discovering the place. A few hundred years later, in 1674, a Captain John Nisbet claimed to have seen the island whilst travelling on a voyage between France and Ireland, stating in his personal records that the island of Hypersil was a bizarre place populated by large black rabbits and a lonesome magician who lived in a tall stone castle. He claimed to have glimpsed the island just off the coast of the Isles of Arran. In fact, talk of the island of Hypersil became so widespread in folklore afterwards that it was considered by many to be the other Atlantis, evidence of a long-forgotten sunken empire that resided in the deep waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Again, strangely enough, in 1862, Hypersil was considered to have been identified as the Porcupine Bank by the Geological Society of Ireland, a series of cold water reefs that appear 200 miles from the coast of Western Ireland. Many consider the reefs to be evidence that the sunken island of Hypersil was once a very, very real place. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 2, Dinas Emris. And for this one, we're staying firmly in the British Isles with perhaps one of the most mystical and magical places in the equally magical realm of Wales, a place of such ancient mystery steeped in folklore traditions and Celtic mythologies that there's quite a few places to choose from when it comes to the mysterious places of folklore. But this one, Dinas Emris, is perhaps the most incredible, and also, strangely enough, perhaps the only entry on this list that has the archaeological credibility to back it up. That's a bold claim, right? But let me explain. As the legend goes, the warlord Vortigern, king of the Britons, fled into Wales to escape the Anglo-Saxon invaders sometime in the 5th century. Expecting some bloodthirsty battle, he chose a lofty hill fort to defend his royal retreat that resided in a rocky and wooded hill near Gwynedd in northwest Wales. Every day, Vortigern's men worked their fingers to the bone trying to erect the first stone tower of the fort, but the next morning they would find their work crumbled and collapsed in a heap. This continued for weeks on end to no avail, and in a final act of desperation, Vortigern was advised to seek the aid of a young boy that lived in the woods. A young boy not conceived by a mortal man, and after sending his soldiers out into the Welsh valleys, eventually they found him. His name was Mryden Emrys, who you may also know by his other name, Merlin Ambrosius, as in, yes, that Merlin of Arthurian legend. Now, the young Merlin quickly diagnosed the king's dilemma and informed him that beneath the mountain were 2 verms, or dragons, one white and one red, one that represented the Saxons and fought for them, but would soon be defeated by the Red Dragon of Wales. While Vortigern wasn't the wisest of kings and ignored Merlin's advice, which quickly led to his downfall, but Welsh legend believed that the Red Dragon remained at the fort, which after Vortigern's downfall was constructed to near perfection following Merlin's design. Strangely enough though, in 1954 and 1956, 2 excavations of the alleged site of Dinas Emris were undertaken, and researchers were surprised to discover that not only were the foundations of the alleged fortifications found, but that they carbon dated to pretty much the precise time that Vortigern ruled in Britain. Yeah, this place is pretty magical in more ways than one. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, El Dorado. Because we can't talk about mysterious places without giving an allusion to one of the most renowned locations in the murky mysteries of humankind, El Dorado, the City of Gold. A place that was once considered to be a man, a mythological tribal chief of the Muisca people, whose legend then morphed into a city, then to a kingdom, and then finally an empire of pure gold and riches untold. Although it was considered to be disseminated across South America by mere whispers, countless rumors that have since morphed into an unreachable legend as the Spanish conquistadors plundered their way through Colombia, Venezuela, and portions of northern Brazil. There is no denying the fact that El Dorado is the holy grail when it comes to mythology, folklore, and the relentless pursuit of human adventure. Throughout history, the concept of El Dorado has undergone several transformations, eventually being combined with the mythologies of several legendary lost cities, many of which may be entirely true. However, perhaps the strangest part of the El Dorado legend is that there may already be credible evidence to at least its existence. Although it was dismissed entirely in the 19th century as a myth, the legend has been tied to Lake Perim, a place that allegedly became the gateway to the Golden City, but was since closed off to prying adventurers. Strangely enough though, evidence of the existence of Lake Perim was discovered in 1977. Researchers discovered watermarks of an ancient lake along the surrounding hillsides where Lake Perim was considered to be, and geological studies corroborated the fact that 700 years prior, in 1690, a massive earthquake had opened up a huge bedrock fault where the lake should have been, forming a rift that caused the lake to disappear completely. I mean, that sounds like a pretty convincing way to lose the entrance to a vast golden city, right? Well, unless it's been discovered already. Who knows? Kicking off at number 5, Agatha. And whilst being a close nominee to our friendly resident top 5 scary witch, Agatha, who is on hiatus at the moment and will return when she so well pleases, this particular entry, although close in subject matter, is a completely different sort of esotericism. You see, for hundreds of years, particularly following the emergence of the occult renaissance in the late 19th century, Western theology and philosophy had a habit of taking fragments of cultures from ancient times and places and adding them to their own. This one, Agatha, is an amalgamation of all of those things. Also known as Agati or Agarath, Agatha is a legendary kingdom said to be located deep within the Earth's core, and in the field of esotericism, it is a name widely associated with the belief of a hollow Earth. Now, although the veracity of that particular belief is, well, full of holes, excuse the pun, its impact on the folklore of the Western world throughout the 18th and 19th century is pretty staggering. The hollow Earth belief is most often associated with the 17th century astronomer Edmund Halley, and was built upon the esoteric beliefs left behind in Greek, Celtic and Hindu mythologies, amongst many others, of an ancient subterranean cave system that leads to a long-forgotten civilization. In the 19th century, a prolific French occultist by the name of Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alvidère published the first reliable account of Agatha in European society. And by reliable, well, that means his methods were otherwise undisclosed. Nevertheless, though, according to him, the secret long-forgotten world of Agatha, along with all of its wisdom and wealth, would be accessible for all of mankind when Christianity finally lived up to the commandments which were once drafted by Moses. He would later elaborate by stating Agatha could only be accessed once the anarchy of human civilization was replaced by the synarchy of the harmonious rule, a belief of cooperation that was proliferated by a secret elite throughout mid-century France, Italy, China, Mexico and Hong Kong. In other instances, Agatha is commonly associated or confused, depending on your stance, with Shambhala, otherwise referred to as Shangri-La. And because of this, in general, theosophists regard the Agatha of legend as a vast underground complex of caves beneath Tibet. In that regard, I guess the search continues. The Kingdom of Saguna. And as so far as the colonization of North America is concerned, this tale is a remarkable example of the time. It's also just straight up awesome, and it's living proof of the influence that oral tradition can have given which perspective it comes from. The Kingdom of Saguna, as legend tells it, reportedly has its origins in an ancient Iroquoian legend and was recorded by the French colonists during the colonization of North America throughout the 16th and 17th centuries. Now, the purpose of this legend may well have been a cunning one, laid out for the native Iroquois to give the French pause, but as they told it, the Kingdom of Saguna was a land far to the northern regions of Canada, a vast and capable kingdom of blonde men rich with gold and furs. Now, the legendary explorer Jacques Cartier first described finding what he referred to as the Saguenay River on his second voyage to the north in 1536. He was accompanied by a number of Chief Donnaconnor's sons who told him of the kingdom. They claimed to him that the Kingdom of Saguna was rich with great mines of silver and gold, and yet the French explorers that followed their directions searched in vain. Now, in hindsight, it is most likely that the Kingdom of Saguna was either entirely mythical or instead an Iroquoian attempt to trick and confuse the French. However, there are some that have since speculated that the Kingdom of Saguna was an ancient pre-Columbian settlement, most often referred to as Los Humedos, a place which we've spoken about regularly here at Top 5 Scary Videos. Now, do with that information as you will, but also note that the kingdom is also regularly associated with the legendary settlement of Norumbega, meaning quiet place between the rapids in the spoken Algonquian languages. Both of these refer to an ancient kingdom of pillars of gold where the inhabitants carried quartz of pearl atop their heads. Now, whilst none of this is for certain, thanks to its place in folklore, it certainly still raises quite a few questions. Next up at number 3, Gorias, Phineas, Murias and Phalias. And whilst we're technically cheating by putting 4 places of myth and legend into one single point in this regard, we definitely can't be having any of them without the other. Also, this particular entry is just awesome, so yeah, there's that too. Now, if you know anything about the mythological cycle of Ireland or the most iconic mythological races found in their literature, the Tuatha De Danann, then you'll also know that there are 4 incredibly important treasures often associated with its core belief. Otherwise known as the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, allegedly bought by the Tuatha De Danann from their 4 island cities of Murias, Phalias, Gorias and Phineas. Together, these 4 treasures form perhaps the most important objects in Ireland's mythology. The Stone of Fal, the Spear of Lug, the Sword of Nuada and the Cauldron of Dagda. And if that sounds like some recipe for the most badass figure in all of mythology and folklore, then I suppose it is. And if you could find each and every one of them by travelling to these 4 mythical islands, then I'm pretty sure you become pretty capable indeed. As the Libor Gabala describes, the Tuatha De Danann resided in the northern islands of the world, where during their early days as a people, they were instructed in the arts of magic before finally moving in dark clouds to what is now Connacht in Ireland. They carried with them from their 4 beautiful cities on 4 beautiful islands, Gorias in the east, Phineas in the south, Murias in the west, and Phalias in the north. The Tuatha De Danann were said to have lived for a time untold on each of their islands, embracing these magical arts, druidry, knowledge, prophecy, and magic. Each of these islands were said to have had their own patron poet, otherwise known as a Fili, who was an enlightened figure remarkably skilled in the occult arts. What is most intriguing though is that the 4 islands are most often associated with a place known as Lachlan, which in the tongue of many Gaelic languages refers to Scandinavia, or more specifically Norway. And as an awesome side note, the 4 magical objects are also widely associated with the ancient Welsh legend of the 13 treasures of the island of Britain. And if you're looking for a tall tale that will stir your spirit and sense of adventure, just take a look at that, because it's brilliant. Coming in at number 2, Scholomance. And yes, for the World of Warcraft fans amongst you, I did just say Scholomance, as in yes, it's a real place, in folklore and fable anyway. And much like the same Scholomance that exists in the western plaguelands of the eastern kingdoms of Azeroth, this particular school of black magic and the dark arts was particularly good at training young necromancers to do the devil's bidding. Of course, in legend anyway. In this instance though, Scholomance was a fabled school of black magic that resided in Transylvania for time forgotten, a place that was allegedly run by the devil himself in many Romanian folkloric accounts. As the legend tells it, throughout its history the school enrolled about 10 students at a time to become the Solomonari, although only one of the 10 graduates would be chosen by the devil himself to become the Weathermaker, incredibly powerful wizards in Romanian folklore that ride dragons and control the weather, causing rainstorms, thunder and hail and all manners of things. As they say, the school of Scholomance itself lay deep underground, and the students which attended it remained confined deep within the bowels of the earth, unexposed to sunlight for the 7-year duration of their study. Here they learned the language of all living things, the secrets of both nature and magic. They would speak to animals, weave spells and recount the entire knowledge of humanity into the book of the Solmonari. If they did that, then they were free to graduate as wizards of the world, powerful figures that would weave folklore for ages to come. Now, although it's entirely unclear where Scholomance truly resided in folklore legend, there are some estimations. Many accounts refer to Scholomance being south of Hermannstad, which is now known as the city of Sibiu in modern Romania. Oh, and also, of course, Scholomance was a stark inspiration for Bram Stoker himself in his Dracula novel, using the school of folklore legend as a basis for his Castle Dracula deep within the Carpathian Mountains. Who knows, maybe one day you'll get an invitation to study there, if you're lucky. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Avalon. Of course, because just as Dorado made its way to the number 1 spot on our previous list, there are just some places in folklore legend that are so out of reach that it is human nature to endlessly long for their existence. Take for example Avalon, perhaps the most legendary and important place in Arthurian legend, the Isle of Apple Trees, the place where King Arthur's sword of Excalibur was forged, and then later, tragically, where Arthur himself was taken to recover from his wounds following the Battle of Camlan and his showdown of epic proportions against Mordred. The name itself first appeared in recorded history in Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, and the details that follow it are more illuminating than you may expect, actually. In fact, Avalon in literature is far more associated with the magic and mysticism of a different kind. As Monmouth penned, Avalon was ruled over by Morgan Le Fay, the powerful enchantress of Arthurian legend, as the chief of her 9 sisters: Morano, Mazo, Glitton, Glittonea, Glitton, Tirono, Thitton and Thiton. As Monmouth described, voyaging to Avalon required a lengthy journey by sea, but it was worth it considering the bounty that awaited you. The island of apples, Avalon, or the Fortunate Isle in its Latin tongue, derived its name from the fact that it produces all things by itself. As the legend tells it, its fields have no need for the ploughs of farmers, as nature provides in abundance. The island produces grain and grapes, and the apple trees of the wood grow tall from the close-clipped grass. Those that live there have lived there for 100 years or more, and the 9 sisters rule it by a pleasing set of rules. In this legend, the otherwise duplicitous Morgan Le Fay is instead a remarkable figure rather than the evil seen in later literature, and she rules Avalon as a place that the ladies live and know all of the magic in the world. In some instances, to shield Avalon from conquering eyes, she covered the island in an all-encompassing mist, where it is said to have existed in secrecy ever since. Perhaps most interestingly though is Avalon's historical connection to Glastonbury Tor, a place which in ancient Britain was a high hill surrounded by fenland and marsh, which is said to have been often shrouded in mist and ruled over by a noblewoman named Morgan, who sheltered King Arthur following the bloodthirsty Battle of Camlan. Folklore, eh? Isn't it the best?
Number 5 is Slaughterhouse Canyon. Slaughterhouse Canyon is home to one of the most tragic stories I have ever heard. In the early 1800s, a family lived remotely in this area. There were 4 of them: the mother, the father, and 2 children. The father would travel into this canyon and have to leave his family for extended periods of time. These trips were for food, money, clothes, anything to assist his family's survival. One day during his journey, he was lost to the rocks and did not return. Without the assistance from the father, the remainder of the family started to starve. Slowly dying of famine and having no resources, the family, and most specifically the mother, lost her mind. Her madness reached a state that she could no longer come back from, and the incessant bawling of her children for food became too loud in her mind to bear. Dressing herself in her wedding gown, she walked her children to a nearby river and threw them in it to let them drown in the water. Realizing what she had done, her cries filled and echoed throughout the canyon until not long after, she finally perished to starvation herself. It is said that this canyon is still haunted by her undead spirit, that anyone who sets foot on these grounds will hear the shrieks that echoed throughout the canyon centuries earlier, and that extended exposure to this area will cause one to lose their mind exactly how the mother did. Many people report having extreme anxiety when in this area and a deep desire to leave. Perhaps that is the mother spirit attempting to warn people of this canyon so no one suffers the same fate that her family did. Regardless of her intentions though, it's safe to say that Slaughterhouse Canyon is deeply haunted. Number 4 is the Devil's Tramping Grounds. This is in reference to a very strange patch of soil in North Carolina. For decades, this circle of dirt has allowed nothing to grow on it, whilst the area surrounding it is home to luscious wildlife. Now there could be any number of reasons for why nothing is growing on this patch of dirt. Simply because an area of land cannot grow wildlife does not automatically mean the devil himself has anything to do with it. However, for this particular spot of land, that just might be the case. Locals have reported putting objects in the center of the circle and coming back a day later to find their items placed right outside of it. There have also been several sightings of deep red glowing eyes in the night. It's widely believed that this specific circle is used by the devil to dance at night, or in some cases, to perform graphic and gruesome rituals. Therefore, if anything is inside his circle, he will move it to the outside. A daring reporter decided to test this theory one evening and slept in that exact spot in a tent. He said that the entire evening he heard the distinct sounds of dancing footprints outside his tent, but couldn't spot anything when he looked outside. Whether it's the devil or a strange phantom creature performing strange phantom rituals, it's clear that something is not right with this dead patch of dirt. Number 3 on this list is Hoobachu Forest in Romania. This forest has been regarded by many as potentially the scariest and most dangerous forest on the entire planet. Unlike your typical haunted house that may be haunted by a singular ghost, this forest has a plethora of creatures to watch out for. Ghosts, apparitions, dark shadowy beings, and demons have all been sighted in this forest, with one person even stating that they've seen a UFO before. The general note that almost everyone leaves with is this strange feeling of being watched and a strong sense of anxiety. This has been taken to the extreme on several occasions though. One story I came across detailed a man who lost his mind and swore that he had a run-in with a demon or the devil. Another one describes how campers consistently heard the stomping of horses right outside their tent, but when they went to check outside, nothing was there. There was also a tale of how 2 people went into the forest and overnight, one of them became fascinated with death. So fascinated that he became incredibly morbid and could only speak about death and how he wanted to watch people die. This forest started out as local Romanian folklore, but over the years has garnered some serious attention. The general consensus though is to stay away. Number 2 on our list is the haunted waters of Utah Lake. Utah Lake is a massive body of water that spans 150 square miles. Whilst it's undoubtedly home to a deluge of underwater critters, some of them don't come naturally. On the shores of Utah Lake are a collection of rocks, aptly named the Massacre Rocks. It's said that hundreds of years ago, the area surrounding Utah Lake was occupied by Native Americans. During that period, there was a great famine that was affecting the people in this group. Therefore, mothers of newborn children, rather than subject their child to a life of harsh starvation where they would likely die anyways, were forced by the community to drown these babies in the water of Utah Lake by the Massacre Rocks. It was through this tragedy that Utah Lake became haunted. Many locals of the area believe that the souls of these children still rest at the bottom of this lake to this day. It is undecided whether or not these souls have taken a physical and amphibious form or if they are simply ghostly apparitions. One thing is for certain though, do not go in the water. Approaching the lake, you will start to hear the cries of young children coming from the water. You must fight the urge to go and help that cry. These children, or water babies as they are often referred to, will drag you to the depths of the lake and you will never be seen again. Number 1 on this list is Eredale Asylum, located in Australia. The Eredale Insane Asylum was a mental institute that housed some of Australia's most dangerous criminals for over 100 years. It's said that many deaths occurred in this asylum, averaging roughly 100 per year. Now, it doesn't house any mental patients today, but it is thought that the spirits of these patients are still there. Visitors of the Eredale Insane Asylum often have to leave soon after they've entered due to fainting or feeling unexplained pain or serious nausea. One of the most common things people note is the sound of repeated banging. The sound of somebody smacking their head against the wall rings throughout the asylum, with no one being able to find the origin of it. Some people have reported actually being shoved or bitten with no one in sight. There are also several rooms of this asylum with special characteristics to them. Gary Webb was a longtime patient of this asylum, known to be particularly gruesome. He died a long time ago. However, if you were to tread inside his room, you would still hear the distinctive shout to get out. The former superintendent's office is a place of particular interest as well, since it will give people passing by the unmistakable taste of bitter acid, which is only too fitting considering the superintendent committed suicide by drinking acid many years earlier. This asylum has seen some horrible atrocities in it amongst its walls, and it's clear that some of them will be locked in there forever.